She didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't even break that composed, camera-proof smile. She just dropped a single, razor-edged line into a room full of people who thought they knew the plot. What did people think we were doing beforehand? With that one sentence, the Duchess of Edinburgh detonated the lazy narrative that she and Prince Edward were merely understudies waiting in the wings for the exits of Meghan, Harry, and Andrew. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a diagnosis. Because if you've been paying attention for the last 2 decades, you know Sophie wasn't auditioning for relevance when the palace needed extra hands. She was already doing the job everyone suddenly noticed. And tonight we're telling the untold version of the quietest power move in modern royal history. How a former PR pro became the monarchy's secret weapon, why her blunt little quip landed like a thunderclap, and how a 4-day, high-security mission to the heart of a conflict zone shows exactly what she's built her name on: work, not noise. The question that provoked the comeback was wrapped in faux innocence. Would Sophie and Edward step up after the family slimmed and scandals flared? Translation: could the B-team carry the show now that the headliners had exited stage left? Sophie didn't flinch. She knows precisely what her calendar looks like because she wrote it with ink that doesn't run. More than 70 patronages. A portfolio that reads like a map of the uncomfortable edges of public life: sexual violence in war, disability advocacy, women's rights, farming communities, British athletics, frontline hospitals, gardens that turn recovery into a humane ritual instead of a lonely endurance test. She isn't the Duchess who arrives for 15 minutes, slices a ribbon, and leaves with a gift bag. She is the Duchess who reads the brief, calls the director, and asks the question that changes next year's budget. Stepping up doesn't apply when you never sat down. Of course the media prefers the combustibles. Scandals make better thumbnails than stamina. And Sophie's strategy has always been the unglamorous one: be boringly excellent for so long that the story eventually caves in and calls you indispensable. She married the Queen's youngest son in 1999, told the world she planned to keep working, learned the palace's unspoken rules the hard way, apologized when she got it wrong, then did the most difficult thing any public figure can do: she grew up where everyone could see her. There's a reason insiders call her the secret weapon. She arrived with a professional vocabulary the firm didn't always speak: targets, messaging, comms plans, and then learned when to leave the deck and walk the floor. She can dress a stage and read a room, but more importantly, she can sit in a back office with a charity's worried treasurer and figure out why the numbers don't add up. So when commentators pit Sophie against Meghan like gladiators in a coliseum of clicks, they miss the point. One woman built a brand out of disruption, the other built a blueprint out of discretion. Sophie's less coverage is not an accident or a punishment. It's policy. It's what happens when you take the oxygen you're given and spend it on other people. It's what happens when you treat headline scarcity as freedom to be useful. And it's why her comeback carried the sting of truth. If your first thought after 3 high-profile departures is that she must step in, you were never watching what she did before anyone left. Behind the palace walls, her stock rose the old-fashioned way, through the late Queen's trust. There are things you can fake in this life. That bond wasn't one of them. Sophie didn't perform affection for cameras, she lived it in courtyards, car rides, and private pews. You could hear it in that unguarded murmur she once used at a lectern and see it in the way she altered her own professional arc to fit the palace's long rules without losing the spine of who she was. It's no coincidence that under King Charles the dial has kept turning in her favor. The new reign rewards what she quietly perfected: calm, competence, and an almost stubborn refusal to make herself the story. Which brings us to the work that cuts through the noise even when it tries to move in silence: a 4-day, top-secret mission to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the kind of trip that never starts with a carpet and never ends with a gala. The brief was brutal and inarguable: shine a light on the weaponization of rape, sit with survivors, amplify the people doing the heaviest lifting in the darkest rooms, and do it in a place where even the drive from the airstrip is a calculation. In Benny, in the conflict-scarred East, a 16-year-old told her what a police officer did to her. Another woman described running from rebels and being attacked in the chaos. There are no palace synonyms for these sentences. There is only bearing witness, refusing to look away, and then funneling the world's attention into support that lasts longer than a news cycle. Now ask yourself, is that what an understudy does? Or is that what a principal does when the lights aren't staged and the lines aren't scripted? The other part of her reach is less headline-friendly and more transformative. The Duchess learned, after her early stumbles, that the palace didn't need a second PR department, it needed a translator. When she told a room, "You want the icing on the cake, not the person dictating your comms plan," she wasn't conceding defeat, she was mapping the lane. Her role is to make donors feel seen and volunteers feel necessary, to pull a patronage's mission through the velvet rope and into the bloodstream of the local council or the National Health Trust. She knows that a garden in a spinal unit isn't a luxury, it's a clinical intervention that lowers heart rates and raises recovery odds. She knows that a sports program for girls isn't a feel-good photo op, it's a pipeline that prevents dropouts, pregnancies, and lifelong health problems. She can do the ribbon. She prefers the receipts. And she brings receipts. Ask the hospital administrators who watched corporate sponsors arrive after a duchess's visit reframed their pitch. Ask the athletes who found their program funded for another season because someone with a title also had a spreadsheet. Ask the women's groups who learned that a royal's diary can force a meeting no one would otherwise grant. The famously down-to-earth label stuck to Sophie not because she is chatty and nice, though she can be, but because she shows up where the earth is rough and stays long enough to make it smoother. The secret isn't a secret at all. It's scheduling. Meanwhile, the family chessboard keeps shifting and Sophie keeps capturing square after square by doing the least theatrical thing imaginable, showing up. She and Edward did not fling open the doors to the slimmed-down firm, they were already inside, carrying weight. When cameras try to chart the supposed cold front between brothers, when think pieces speculate about the king's relationship with his heir, when every relative's cough becomes content, Sophie remains exactly where the new monarchy needs her, reliable, readable, relentlessly non-explosive. She's proof that the quiet lane is not the slow lane. It's the lane that gets you where you said you were going. It helps that she's fluent in normal. The PR office jobs. The decision to build an agency from scratch. The choice to step away when the crown demanded different boundaries. The teenage kids who grew up mostly out of the splash zone. Real life qualifies you for real work. Sophie understands how ordinary systems fail ordinary people and how extraordinary platforms can fix that, not with a wave, but with a phone call and a follow-up. That's why local organizers love her. She's famous enough to help, humble enough to listen, prepared enough to matter. Now, about that line, what did people think we were doing beforehand? It wasn't just shade, it was a syllabus. It told the press to go do their homework. It told spectators to recalibrate their expectations. It told her critics to stop confusing silence with absence. And it told any future royal who thinks the job is the glamour that the only real currency this institution has left is competence that survives a hostile headline. You can survive 1,000 gossip cycles if you keep your promises to the people who will never trend. Under Charles, Sophie's profile will keep climbing for the same reason a good investor's portfolio grows, compounding. Every year of steady delivery earns her more leverage to pick the causes that fit her temperament and her training. Every successful trip abroad buys the palace another hard assignment she can execute without drama. Every charity that moves from awareness to outcomes because a duchess cared carefully rather than loudly strengthens the argument the monarchy still makes to the country, keep us, because we help keep things working. It won't satisfy the perpetually hungry. There will always be headlines aching for catfights and conspiracies. But the future of this family is less about fireworks and more about furnaces, machines you barely notice that keep you warm because they simply function. Sophie is a furnace. She doesn't apologize for it. She built it on purpose. And if the awards never quite catch up with the output, if the trending topics rarely spell her name, she will sleep just fine. Because the nurses she met last month know. The survivors in Benny know. The kids who get to play sport this term know. The gardeners who see a patient's shoulders drop when the wind moves through a stand of lavender know. The Queen knew. The King knows. And behind them, a public that has grown allergic to palace drama is slowly, silently, gratefully figuring it out too. So the next time someone asks if she'll step in, remember the answer. She already did. Long before you asked. Long before the narrative needed a new protagonist. Long before the algorithms looked her way. She turned notoriety into utility, proximity into productivity, a title into a toolkit. And in a world that can spot fake a mile off, that is the only comeback that really cuts.